Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of Leaders and Friends. I'm really honored to be here today with Joe Mastrangelo. Joe and I worked together for many years at GE. Joe grew up in New York, but lived around the world, mainly in Europe, worked in a bunch of really difficult and tough businesses, is now CEO of EOS Energy. So he's running his own show now. And we're going to have a great discussion about what's going on in the world of energy. But Joe, it's great to see you. Welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Jeff, thanks for the time. Good to see you as well. Great to be back.
Good to see you. So Joe, you're living the energy transition. It's a big part of the global politics, what's going on in the US today. Give me kind of your sense of like, where are we in the energy transition, and how do you think about it running a company in this space?
Yeah, Jeff, what I always tell everybody, because of what I'm doing now, people look at this as like, are you a green tech energy leader? And I always tell them, no, I'm an energy leader with 30 years of experience across a wide range of technologies. So like, what energy is always going to be a mix, right? So there's always going to be a place for different technologies. And I think you're going to see gas continue to be an important fuel as we move forward. You're going to see more wind, more solar, and the need for energy storage, not only to firm up renewables, but also to help us with grid stability and ability to deliver energy when you want it. I'd say we're in the early days of it. And like what we try to do, looking at EOS, and what attracted me to EOS is just knowing that you need a durable product, and knowing that that product needs to be able to operate in the harshest conditions in the world. And that's kind of what we tried to develop, and realizing that one cycle a day with a battery is not going to be enough, so we can do multi-cycles. But we're definitely in the early innings of where this is going to play out. And I think outside of any kind of government policy or things like that, the industry was moving towards energy storage, and needs energy storage around any kind of fuel that's generating power.
So Joe, as you said, you're in the energy storage business. You're running a classic startup.
Yeah.
Most of your career, you worked for the big company. So you worked for the big company, now you work for the small company. Just reflect on like what each one uses in your like leadership toolkit, and how you persevered, what you've learned, things like that.
Yeah, I'll start with EOS and then go back into like the time at GE. And what I always tell people here at EOS is, when you were always in a big company, you used to sit there and say, God, if I had a white sheet of paper, I'd be able to do this perfectly, because I'm certainly smarter than everybody that was here before me. And what you realize is that white piece of paper really is blank. And when you start filling it in, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it, right? So that, hey, let's go to a startup, it's going to be all fun, and we're going to grow. There's a lot of rolling up your sleeves and doing things that you've never done before. I think the thing that kind of helped me coming into this experience from what I had at GE was, GE taught you, and you saw how to do business around the world. You saw so many things that happened, and I was, lucky in my career in GE to have spent significant periods of time in one place to go through a cycle. Like when you came in as chairman and said, these 18, 24-month jobs aren't going to build big business leader. I directly benefited from that decision of being able to see, like, how do you navigate, and what's the decision going to look like 2 years from now? And what GE kind of taught you is like, A, I had the network and could tap into resources that somebody else in my position probably wouldn't be able to. And B, having been able to see a cycle through and know the decision you're making, what it might look like on the other side, it just helps you adapt. I think the other thing, like when I look back and think about what did I wish I knew back then that I know now, is around capital allocation and how you place your bets around technology, and how you develop technology, turn it into a product, and turn that product into a solution someone wants to buy. I think I've become a lot sharper here, just because of the fact that we've always been out raising capital to get to our next milestone.
And so now you have, I read, a new investor in one of the biggest private equity firms in the world. How does that change the way you think about running the company, and how does that change the context of, let's say, the future for EOS?
Yeah, so when I look at the period here was, when you look at energy storage and battery companies, there's a lot of companies that have come in the space that haven't made it to scale because there's a lot of, over promising on what the technology can do and then not being able to get there. And I think one of the main reasons why Cerberus put the money into EOS was they saw that we had a technology that could scale and a product that worked. What
Yep.
they allow us to do now, though, is like what we were really, we were fighting every day to keep a roof over our head and keep the lights on, right? And now we're starting to think about what can the company look like 3, 4, 5 years from now, and how do you scale into this secular shift that you're seeing in the energy industry? But at that time, like, and this has been true every stop of my career, is like that 5-year strategy doesn't mean anything if you don't execute today. So like what hasn't changed is delivering on your commitments. And then what you're able to do now is to look and say, how do we think a little bit broader with a bigger capital base behind us, and not having to be out daily raising money allows you to be more focused on how you position the company for the long term.
Yep. Yep. You mentioned earlier cycles. I had to laugh. I'm still a GE Vernova stockholder. It picked up another buy rating. The stock's done great. It's the same products that were there 5 years ago when everybody thought the business was crap. And so, how do you reflect on it? I tell my students that leaders win the cycles, right? Good leaders know how to win the cycles. What does it take to lead a company or a business through cycles?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So, particularly when you look at energy, and then if you take a look and reflect back specifically on the gas turbine market, gas turbine around the world have always been a very cyclical, up and down market, right? But technology wins over the long haul, right? So you've really got to have technology that you can inject back into your installed base, but at the same time, you can't stop in a down cycle, because when the cycle comes back, you're going to get caught flat-footed. And you have to realize, like, when you look at what's happening right now, right? People are saying, like, oh my God, artificial intelligence and data centers have come out of left field to create this new demand in the energy industry. That's been true almost every 20 years in the energy industry. And if you don't think with the context of how do I survive the downside to make sure I'm stronger when I come out the other side, you're going to miss out on opportunities. And I think the good news, for our former colleagues at Vernovas, I think they've got a broad portfolio to address now what's going to come back to say, like, we're going to have to put big base loads onto the grid, and gas is probably the best fuel to be able to do that.
Yep. No, that's right. Joe, you in the storage business, you're going to compete against China. Kind of everybody in our generation is pretty adept at understanding how China works and things like that. How do you think about that in the context of, growing EOS over the long term?
Yeah, so we, so go back to when I first got here, the strategy of EOS was, let's build our batteries over in China, bring them over to the US, put electrolyte in them, integrate them, and ship them to customers. And having done a couple of factories in China, I knew the amount of work it took to get a factory up and running. And I remember talking to the board at the time and saying, we don't have enough money to send people over to visit this factory in China, so we're never going to get them to be able to produce. We brought the manufacturing back, and I said, without an established manufacturing process, it's going to be hard to localize anywhere. Mm-hmm. That turned out to be a smart economical decision, but also fortuitous in the fact that we had everything in the US when COVID hit. So that's really how EOS survived COVID, was most of our suppliers were within a car ride, and we were able to keep going on our development of the product. What that has now morphed itself into is this grid security and wanting a US-based product, and us having a 94% supply chain that's in the United States. Now, that was a lot of work to be able to do that. Now, when you're doing that, what I've also told everybody was, China it's a reality. They're going to come in at a lower price point than us. We've got to be prepared to compete there. And even when the IRA legislation came in and you had production tax credits which helps you get up to scale, what I kept telling the team was, like, we can't make the production tax credit the catalyst for us to be successful. It's got to be something that happens on top. So we've got to stay focused on how do you compete to win, to be able to compete against China. And I go back again to like one of the experiences you brought up of spending a lot of time in Europe throughout my career was, you know, when I was in Florence in the oil and gas business, we were able to compete against Chinese manufacturers out of Italy by staying focused on the global cost. And that's kind of what we've done here at EOS.
Yeah, no, that's great. What's one, if you think about, again, the next decade in the energy space, what's like one bet that you would make, or one idea, one thing that you look at today and say, gosh, this is really going to be amazing?
Look, so I think that there's going to be so I look at, again, because I'm here, I think about energy storage every day. I think there's going to be multiple players that are going to get there, but it's going to evolve over time. I think the next thing that is going to come is this concept of, and we talked about this a lot at our time in G, where the grid's everybody's going to want to be connected, but they're also going to want to have a certain amount of independence around being able to provide their power. So I think there's going to be a lot of things that are going to emerge around the electrical system and the system design, because I'm not sure massive grid investments, given the returns, are what's going to get us to this next level. So you're going to have this interconnected network where you're both dependent upon and connected to, but independent from.
Yeah, I agree. The grid's not going to get you there.
Right.
You know, Joe, on leadership, you know, you have certain traits that made you successful for the last 30 years, but you also now are in a startup. What did you have to unlearn from your GE days to make yourself successful today? And I'm tired now, so you're not going to hurt my feelings. So
no, but Jeff, when you look at, GE, what we would do is somebody would come to you and say, I'm going to deliver 10, and you'd ask for 12 or 13 and hope you would get 11, right? When you come into a startup and you ask somebody, they say, how much money do we have? Because I don't know what I want to do. Like, the biggest adjustment that I had when I came in was I have to kind of manage this on, like, how far can we get with what we have? Right. So there was this piece of leading by, okay, let's go from A to B with what we have, and that'll be success, and then B to C and keep growing. And then at the same time, trying to motivate people, like when you have a big structure around you and an established culture, it's easier to attract and retain talent, right? Coming into something like this, to attract and retain talent becomes more difficult because it's a lot more dependent upon your leadership style. So, like, you could be a little bit of a jerk in a place like GE because the structure is going to help you survive, right? Yeah. In a place like this, you really can't get away from it. And like what I've learned, and we've talked about this a couple of times, was like, I like to work, right? That's both a strength for myself, but also a detractor from a leadership standpoint. And how do you not wear people out on a marathon, right? Because doing a startup is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And like, when you look at some of the people that have been here my entire time, what they often tell me is like, look, you made us believe in ourselves, and that failure truly wasn't going to happen. Like, if we came up on an obstacle, find a way to overcome the obstacle to get to the goal. And that to me was the hallmark of what GE was. At least the GE that I remember was we work our way through the problems and get to the other side. And to have that ingrained in you, but then have to change it where you're not saying, here's your target, give me 20% more because you can go get it. Not having the money to do that, you really have to change the style of how you lead the team. Yeah, makes sense. Last question. You've got a young, kids that are just getting ready to enter the business world. I spend time with students, business school students and stuff like that. What advice do you give young people starting their career today? You're on a journey, right? What I always think about is, I'm a finance person by education. I did that for like my first 5 or 6 years in GE, then kind of worked my way into operations and worked through selling and did a quality role, and then ran a couple different businesses. And you should be teaching yourself how to learn. and how to reinvent yourself as you go through your career. Probably the biggest mistake I made through my career is like, we're all impatient to get to the next level, and that will happen with time. You do have a lot of time. Like when I think back and think, I've been doing this now for 31 years, it's hard to believe. And the things I worried about 25 years ago really aren't as important as the experiences I was able to gain to build up. What we're trying to do is build up this base of experience that allows you to make better decisions as you grow your career. So when you're starting off, look for that opportunity that's going to give you those experiences where you can learn and make yourself better at whatever you want your craft to be, wherever that is.
I think you mentioned something, Joe, about the ability to reinvent yourself. I actually think that's a seminal capability for everybody. It's just the world moves too quickly, and it's just got to be something people are dedicated to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just every day try to be a little bit better than the day before.
But Joe, look, you've got an incredible platform that's important to the energy space and EOS Energy. It's doing a startup. I'm on the board of a startup in the energy world. It is friggin' hard, man. So yeah. I think it's just like one of those things that. But if you can get there, they turn into huge companies, right? There's no such thing as there's no such thing as $1 billion energy company. You're either tens of billions or you're zero.
Right.
And it's something people don't appreciate. But it's great to see you. You're always bring a warmth to my memories, and congratulations on everything you've done.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, Joe.